Hello and good day. I'm Scott with Wet Edge, and I'd like to welcome you to another of our watercolor from a designer's perspective. And I'm here today with my good friend Ryan Pieszchala from Quest Pools. Ryan, thank you for joining us.
Absolutely.
And Ryan's going to share with us some of his wisdom and insight on watercolor and how it pertains to the design of your pool. So Ryan,
Yes.
walk me through a little bit when your clients are coming in, they sign the contract, and now we're discussing materials,
Right.
tile, coping, plaster. How do you help them get from the vision that they may or may not have in their head to the finished product?
Well, the first things that I think about is, first and foremost, people are just drawn to water. If we think about it, people, when they think of recreation, a lot of times it's going to the beach, snorkeling, surfing, even the river, a pool, things of that nature. And naturally, just in our minds, we are drawn to the color blue. If you tell any child, hey, pick up a box of crayons, color a pool, it's always going to be some hue of blue.
Yeah.
Trying to dial in exactly what that hue is, that's where it takes a little bit more investigation. That's where I sit down with my client, and perhaps they are well-traveled or maybe they're not. But I just start to ask them those questions about what is it that appeals to you with water? And generally what I do is I have a portfolio of projects that I've done in the past, and they may have varying degrees of depth of color to that pool water. And then I just start going through those. And as I go through them, I just start asking them, what do you think of this watercolor? Knowing in my mind what the base plaster color is. Then I go on a little bit further. Do you like this one? What about this one? Kind of that optometrist. 1 or 2, 3 or 4, that kind of thing. Once you narrow that down and we kind of move from perhaps deep, rich, dark blacks that give a very reflective quality to the pool to something like the far end of the spectrum where you have like white and it's like that crystalline, clear, crisp glass of drinking water.
Yeah.
And you find out where they're falling in that spectrum. That helps me to dial in at least on the color. And as I do that and we can drill down and find out really where that needs to be, you're going to find that you fall probably within about 2 or 3 color choices.
Okay.
So
Now, you said that you already have an idea of the base color that's going in there. Explain that a little bit.
So predominantly, and you'll find this as you talk to any designer, they're going to have their own little bents, their own little things. As you're creating the pool and you're designing the pool, you probably already have in your mind what you, personally, feel is a soothing and relaxing color. Most of my clients, I would say I kind of steer them to that point in that I've always gravitated more towards a more gray bottom pool. A lot of times my clients, what they do is when they come to me, they say, oh, I know that I want a blue pool, so I got to have blue plaster. Well, that's not exactly entirely true. What I found is, and perhaps it's so many years of all that was offered in the pool industry was white Marblite plaster, white plaster, white plaster. So that's all anybody had. And so that hunger, that thirst for something different, something richer, was really birthed as, quartz products started to come on, colored plaster, and those pigments got to play together, and then as you moved into the pebbles. And so as all those things started to find their foothold in the marketplace, I really found that I gravitated more towards that color that would give you a nice look as you looked across the top on a sunny day, kind of that aquamarine, that turquoise. And what I found time and time again was it pretty much was like a French gray type of color.
Now, what do you say? Because I'm with you. Gray does give you some of the nicest blue color, that
Sure.
turquoise color, but how often have you heard, oh, I don't want to look at gray, like here on this top step.
Exactly.
It's like when you look at here on the water,
Sure.
that's beautiful color, but then up here, I don't want to see that gray.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
give the folks some guidance on that. In that regard.
So if you are, there's 2 things that you have to take into consideration as you're viewing watercolor or you're choosing watercolor. The first one is when you look at a sample, that's where I tell clients, just set it on the floor, because whatever you can see in air as you look at the floor, that's what you're going to see when you stand over the edge of the pool and look straight down in. So if that color appeals to you at that close range, that's fine. When people start getting concerned about the richness of the color, that's more when you're sitting on the patio and you're looking out across the pool.
Yeah.
So in doing that, you want to find that perfect balance between the two. So maybe now you move from a flat, straight gray, and it becomes more of something that moves into a slate blue gray, like a Tahoe color, or maybe even something that if they really want something vibrant, maybe like a Pacific Coast, you know,
Blue Pacific Coast and the
those kind of colors.
Okay, now explain a little bit as far as, you know, that's a key point, you know, the different perspectives, like we are poolside
Sure.
versus like if we were up on the deck or looking out of our house at the window, looking across the pool.
Yeah.
Explain a little bit how the surrounding materials and the ultimate color of the finish that you choose interact and the effect that they can have as far as, you know, do you want a darker bottom finish with lighter materials or a lighter finish with dark materials, you know,
Exactly.
if you could.
A lot of that comes in through the interview process with the client. You know, you really have to be an investigator as you're talking with your client and find out what is it that you want this pool for. At two ends of the spectrum, you have one person that all they care about is water. They don't care what it looks like. They don't care the materials that go around it. They just want to be able to get wet. And then at the other one, you may have a client that wants it completely for the visual, and they're never going to put a toe in the water.
Yep.
Those are the two ends of the spectrum.
Yep.
And a lot of times, what you find is it's in that investigating. How do you plan to use the pool? Is this for entertaining? Is this merely a visual thing? If it's visual, then man, we really want to make sure that we're really drilling down on that. And they're not going to say this right out front. You have to catch on those little verbal cues as you're talking with them.
Yeah.
If they say, oh, well, I'm really into aesthetics. Red flag, you know, hot button, write that down and make sure that you're working with that.
Yeah.
And then as we even drill further down, the aesthetics. Well, to you, what's the aesthetics? Is it the watercolor or is it the feature? Sometimes people want, like on this, we have the spa in and of itself is its own feature.
Yes.
You know, by being a 360 spillover, we have a sheet of water over the top that looks like glass. Very subtle, no real sound quality to it. But that is a feature that I wanted to stand out in this design.
Yeah.
The watercolor inside doesn't really matter to me too much, but I wanted whatever else was around it to not be so abrupt of a contrast that you would go, huh? You know what I'm saying?
So, because depending on the watercolor, the feature can stand out even more.
Absolutely.
Or it could be a little more subtle.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, in my eyes, if I took this and I put in like perhaps an indigo or a blue Pacific Coast, where it's that vibrant aqua,
Lighter blue.
blue, that light blue, you know, almost a robin's egg blue kind of look. To me, I think that would be too much of a contrast against some of these mid-range tones that we have going on. There are a lot of browns, a lot of tans, grays, and my whole effect was to have the pool itself be striking, but yet with natural materials. You can see some of the natural limestone that I incorporated with it. There's different textures everywhere. The limestone texture, I wanted that to kind of tie back in with the home. Also, it's kind of a natural, relaxed setting with all the landscaping out here. So those were all things that I wanted to accentuate, but I didn't want the watercolor to be the dominant focal point. I wanted it to just be something that, if this was a river, the same water quality that you would see if you were driving by the river, you could see that. So that was what I was after in choosing the watercolor for this particular project.
Okay, Ryan. So I'm looking at this pool, and it's beautiful, by the way.
Thank you. It's mine.
Yeah, there you go. And I noticed we got a lot of straight lines, geometric.
Right.
Do you find that certain watercolors play better with specific designs? Like, for instance, in geometric, there are those who fall on one side of the spectrum where lighter colors tend to fit this type of design better than like a darker, but then some folks believe the darker because you get that reflecting pond sort of quality. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's kind of hard to say that there's always one hard and fast rule because you're going to find exceptions to that rule all the time. I think a lot of it's going to play into the overall design and the environment with which you're designing in.
Okay.
In my personal opinion, if you have a smaller vessel, let's say that you have a confined backyard, you're close to a wall, the house surrounds it on the sides, and you're just kind of hemmed in. So it really commands a smaller type of vessel to be designed. You could go with the school of thought of, man, in order to make it appear a little bit larger, you could go with a lighter color because you'll see more of those interior contours. It'll give you more of a sense of depth as you look into the pool structure itself. If it's very tiny, like a cocktail pool or something of that nature, or perhaps a swim spa type of thing, You know, if you go with a black, you could have that reflecting pond kind of thing. If it is small, why not make it kind of a 1-2 punch to where it is a reflecting pond? You know, when in the morning, when the day is still and water's still and everything, but then also, you know, it lends itself to being attractive as you use it for your swimming lesson.
And have you found, with your experience, like you can take that same color and put it in one of those smaller pools, and you find the hue that it casts is more washed out or lighter than, would you say, like in a pool this size or maybe a little bit bigger?
Oh goodness, yeah. I mean, even as the sun plays through the day, and maybe you can even notice as the sun and the clouds are moving through as we're having this video, you can see that color in the pool just change with how shadows cast across, depth of the pool. And we can have the same exact color, and someone will see that and go, wow, how come that one's so much deeper blue than this one? And I explain to them that it is color choice.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, so depth a lot of times will play a lot into that as well.
Okay. So when you're talking about the design and the materials, let's talk a little bit to our audience a little bit about how the watercolor plays or interacts with the materials that ultimately get selected for a project.
Absolutely. In my last pool that I had almost a pure snow white marble coping. And with that, I had like a Pacific Coast electric blue. And I tell you, there was nothing more striking than walking upstairs and looking through my window, and you could see this perfect stripe of white with this awesome color of aquamarine that was there. And it just jumped out at you. I mean, it looked like, you know, the pendant on my wife's necklace. Yeah. You know, and so a lot of those things, the more contrast you have there, the more it can jump out and grab your attention. Some people want to accentuate that, and some people want to downplay that. So again, it all goes back to that conversation with your client, is making sure that you're hitting the expectation. One of the ways that I try to help finalize or hone in that expectation is, I'm a little bit more of a smaller operation, a boutique builder. I do about 20 pools a year. And so by happenstance, I happen to have, even in my own neighborhood where I live here, about 6 to 8 pools that I can take my clients on a tour of, so that they can see that sample in real life. Yeah. So many times I have people and they look through and they find a sample, we get them wet under the sink, and they go, this is the color. And I go, okay, great. So we drive out to that color and they look at it in the backyard and they go, oh, it's lighter than I thought. Or I didn't know it was gonna really look like that. Yeah. So all those things play a factor. Every backyard is unique. I've even had people that said, you know, gosh, I don't like that color because right there on the wall it looks green. I think that's algae. And I'm like, no. See, the foliage is really, really close to the pool, and it's reflecting the green off of the leaves of the tree. And so all those little nuances that an untrained eye might not pick up, you know, we as pool professionals
take into account.
Yeah. You know, we've got to make sure that we're pointing those things out to clients. So if we've got a client and their whole backyard is just an open canvas, and all it is 360 degrees of sky, there's no shade that's going to touch that vessel. And that's going to play a whole lot differently than even something like in my backyard. As my foliage has grown up, and it changes over time. I mean, if you looked at my backyard 3 years ago, these would be tiny little shrubs. Yeah. And now here it is, and things are taller than myself, you know, 6, 8 feet tall. So they're casting shadows where I never had that play before. So, you know, all those things you need to take into account when you're choosing that color, and make sure that that's not going to be something that's going to rub you the wrong way.
Okay. And have you found that there are certain materials that will tend to draw, like if somebody really wants to try to keep that water as blue as possible, have you found there's certain colors of materials that tend to draw that out more compared to where you put that same color next to browns or like earth tones or some other color that kind of tilts it more in the green spectrum?
Gosh, obviously I haven't been that observant about that to go back and take a look at anything. Yeah. Most of my clients for the last few years have been staying more in that kind of mid-range natural tone with all their colors. I've got a lot of them that, you know, we're kind of an oil industry town here, and so we have a lot of people who move a lot. And so I think a lot of times the mindset is they don't want something so trendy that if they build this in their pool and they get an assignment to go overseas in 5 or 6 years, then it's going to be this thing that people go, oh, well, I can tell you built that in whatever decade. Yes. You know, so there are some of those clients that push the envelope and they want something really nouveau and urban and, you know, straight, streamlined and everything. but I would say that that's not really more of the norm for me. So
Okay.
I don't know that I could really quantitatively answer that question to say that, man, I've seen that this color against this really makes that change a whole lot.
Okay.
So
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right, Ryan, and let's let's kind of wrap this up a little bit as far as taking some of the concepts we're talking about and how you actually applied this to this project, this lovely project behind us.
yeah, so my pool is set up that I actually have two pools because I had two criteria. First of all, we love playing water volleyball. So the upper pool is all 4 feet deep, one flat level all the way across.
Which is this one right here.
Yeah, this one here. This is the upper pool. The lower pool goes deeper. My wife and daughter wanted to be able to dive and do backflips and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I knew I needed a deep pool.
How do you think it's held up?
Oh, it's great.
Yeah.
I've had no issues with it. I love the color of it. It's just a color that I'm drawn to, and I think it plays well. It picks up some of the grays that are in this, the tile that are in the spa, and it's just still. My thought concept behind it is kind of that river. Here in Texas, we have the Guadalupe River, which has this nice aqua color to it.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of limestone around the hill country in Texas. And so that's kind of the features that I wanted to bring out in this design was some rugged textures. Yes, it's a clean line, but it's kind of rustic contemporary.
Oh, okay.
For lack of a better description.
That works.
I think the proper term would be transitional.
Yeah.
But I'm by no means a designer to that degree. But anyway, I enjoyed this color, and I wanted something of like color to kind of complement on the other one. I didn't want it so stark of a contrast that when I brought clients here, they would go, wow, this one is so much different than this one. So I actually went with the same hue, and so they're both Tahoe as the base color.
So the bottom pool has North Shore Tahoe in the
That
satin
is
matrix.
correct.
Okay.
Yes, the satin matrix. And the reason that I chose, this upper pool is elevated a foot. And if you can see behind me, we kind of live in a pecan forest. And those pecan leaves, as they're doing today, they fall off and they flutter around. And in this upper pool, by it being elevated a foot, it helps to keep a lot of that trash from blowing across the yard, across the deck, and straight into the pool.
Yeah.
Well, I knew that I'd have a big...
I love this. And it's also serves, you increase the amount of space for entertainment or for seating. So
it's great. It's like built-in bench seating.
Yeah.
It's awesome for entertaining.
Yes.
For sure. But it provides a great barrier for trash being prevented from coming in. So the lower pool, I knew, man, I'm going to have all kinds of garbage going there.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to go out when my pool is 40 degrees and dredge leaves out of the bottom of my pool. So I knew that I needed a very resilient surface like the pebble. And the satin matrix is great. It's a great tight fit. So those pebbles are a little more on a plane surface. Yep. So there's less of a rise and fall or crest and trough, if you will. And knowing that that's the deeper pool where everybody's diving in, it's 9 feet deep. The shallowest point is 4 feet. Most of the time, once you're off the steps, you're wading or swimming, and that's really our exercise pool. So texture was not as much of a concern.
And particularly folks who may be in the Houston area or in the hill country can definitely relate.
Absolutely.
Or anybody else who has a river in their neck of the woods.
There you go.
All right. Well, Ryan, appreciate it so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you for your time.
No problem.
And hope you found this helpful and informative. And thanks again from all of us at Wet Edge, the Pool Fitness Resource.